Good afternoon. Today is the 28th day of November 2016, and we are here with an old friend from Orville, Tency. Tency, welcome.
Thank you.
And happy to have you with us.
Thank you.
How did you first hear of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, and then, of course, Orville?
I was traveling through the UK as a young student, 18 years, and in London I was invited to have an evening with friends, and on the coffee table was a brochure from Orville with the picture of Mother and Sri Aurobindo.
Oh.
And that's the first time that I saw. I was 18. And I noted down the address. I leafed into it, noted down the address, came back to my place in Belgium, wrote, got an answer from Switzerland, and that's where slowly the correspondence, they send us some brochure where...
what
I
year
think
was this, Tency?
1968.
Oh,
1968, August. And the day that I found out that small brochure about Orville must have been very close, either just before the 15th or after the 15th of August. It took a couple of years, and then when I was 21, I traveled overland to India. Did the whole tour of India and ultimately ended up in Pondicherry.
Did you came from Belgium across where?
Yeah.
How did you
Overland.
go? Overland.
Overland.
With
like
your own
so
vehicle?
many young people did at that time. In a real hippie caravan. And ended up ultimately in Pondicherry. Was accepted to come to Orville, stayed at that time in Pondi,
So you
and
saw-
during daytime in one of the guest houses. I think it was a guest house on what is now the Anasalai. There was an Orville guest house at that time. I can't remember the name. It was full. Everybody had a room. I received the room. And then during daytime, we went to Orville, did work, and came back in the evening. I did that for a couple of months and then moved ultimately, or a couple of weeks, I can't remember. But then ultimately I went and moved to Orville and stayed with friends.
Now, you saw Mother at Darshan?
During that time, Mother was still alive. That was in 72.
Right.
I arrived in 71, 72. And on the 5th of March, I had that unbelievable experience of having a darshan with Mother. It was on a Sunday.
Oh, a private?
No. Inline.
Inline, okay.
I had asked at that time Shamsundar, and he arranged for it. So that was my experience, which was, I think, defining for the rest of
your life.
Of the life.
I see.
Of my life.
I see. Just one glance at Mother.
One meeting, we stood in line. I had a little single flower of aspiration, plumeria. What is the name of the...
Psychological perfection.
Psychological perfection. I forgot about it. Psychological perfection. We entered the room. I think she was seated down in a chair. The first image that I got was astonishment, because it was a very old lady bending over, listening, looking, not saying much. A couple of people before me, there was a young man with whom she tried to have a conversation. Then she asked some words to Champaklal, who was an attendant, together with several people. And she laughed. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. And then there was somebody else, and then it was my part to go in front of her. I don't think it took very long. I believe and I know that it was very intense, very intense. She looked very deep. I bowed down automatically. And after a while I thought, you had the feeling, yes, that's okay. Closed, and I went. Cycled back to Aspiration, where I was staying at the moment with Ruth. Ruth Loma.
Yes, with Ruth.
In his hut, and slept up till the evening.
I've often had the same experience.
That was a defining moment in my life, and I only realized it afterwards. I mean, it was powerful, but the ripples continued moving and proceeding for the rest of my life. There was another defining moment when later on I came back with Hilde, my partner, and we stayed for it was all very difficult at that moment in the end of the 70s, 77 and things like that. We were in the full dispute with Sri Aurobindo society and things like that. And we managed to stay, we managed to build a house, we managed to regulate our visa, which was a kind of a miracle at that time.
To regulate what?
The visa.
Oh, the visa.
Yeah, because we came on a tourist visa, and it was difficult to get an extension at that time. So that was all by grace taken care of. And just we had to go back after 2 years to our native country, Belgium, and there was a person who was called Narad, asked me, I go to see Nalini, would you like to join me? And I said yes. We had a few viewings of Nalini when we were staying in Park Guest House. He used to walk, come out of the car, walk, and then went back. And I remember very distinctively, Narad, you were looking for a paper, a land paper that you could not find back. At that time you were staying and living in the nursery. And you wanted to go and see Nalini to ask him to help to find that paper back, because it was a land dispute or something like that.
Yes.
And we both went to the ashram main building, went to Nalini's room. And these are all very strong impressions, because all the ashramite lived in small rooms, tiny rooms almost. There was a little desk, a chair, and a bed.
Yes.
And Nalini was not well. He was resting on his bed with his famous cap.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went in. I stood a little bit on the door, and you said, I brought my friend, the Orville Tency, and he's going together with Hilde back to Belgium, and they would like to have your blessings. And then I was invited to come in front of him. He looked, again, very strong. He looked at me, and he told me, I know you. I know you very well. These words have been kept inside, but I still don't know what they mean. And it was very powerful, very mysterious, because on a rational level you ask me, what would be my connection with somebody? which I never met in my life. And it was very powerful. I know you very well. So these were two encounters in the beginning of the Orville experience, which are quite defining.
Now you had to go back to Belgium.
Yeah, but that was a very short span. That was for earning some money, 3 months, and then coming back to Orville. It was a regular feature of many Orvillians at that time.
Because there was no money.
Financial situation was precarious, difficult. We lived on the same level actually as the villagers, nothing more. We ate the same food. Coffee was often not available. Forget about butter. We could only dream about these things. Coffee was made from kambu, a local millet, burnt and served. So that, you had to replenish your kitty in order to stretch it again a couple of years. So we both went on a regular basis until the children came. That was Orville, Mother, Sri Aurobindo, Nalini, and some other people.
And so then you came back, and what year was that when you came back?
That was in 79.
79.
But that, it was a regular feature. Every 2 years, we tried to make a trip, or every 3 years, in order to earn sufficient money to survive.
Yeah. And when did you finally settle?
We settled in the 77. We
when
came
you
in
built your house.
77. We settled, and then quite very soon after that, we found a place in Centerfield. We built a temporary house, and we stayed there.
What was your feeling in the early 80s about Orville?
Could you define a little bit?
Yeah, I will, because we don't have any negativity in our videos, because there's plenty in the world.
No.
But just an overall vision of how Mother had begun this great adventure.
It was definitely an adventure. And the feeling was one of, we had to do everything ourselves. It was really the beginning stages where we just managed to do the basics, having a piece of land, fencing it off. Usually the most practiced activity was taking care of the land, planting, making sure that you had water, sometimes animals, and that created a kind of connection with most of the people who were living. Later on, they were we became a little bit separate, two groups, because we had some problems, but the overall feeling was one of togetherness, trying to carve out a lifestyle which allowed us to build Orville, city of the future, with all means and creativity that came towards us. I mean, it was a period of huge creativity, because when you don't have the financial means, you are much more inventive and innovative. Yes. And it's the most with the least that you do. Yes. And that happened during these years. Matra Mandir was being built. There were kind of focal points. Aspiration was one, center was one. We lived in the center field, close to Matrimandir. And there was a common connection between most of the people living in that area. And one which was dynamic, usually positive, and which gave an option for the future. I think that was our impression, because if you had no connection with either Mother or Sri Aurobindo, or the land, or the aims, or the willingness to take up that inner adventure, you stayed for a while, but you disappeared, because it was too difficult. It was too harsh, no social life. You were, very much concentrated during the long evenings upon yourself or with your partner. There was no electricity. Everything happened by candlelight.
Yes.
Or Petrolight, Petromax and things like that. So it was an adventure. And that stayed for many decades like that.
What was the first work you took up?
In the first time that I came to Orville in 1971, I met Ruth. And Ruth had that wonderful capacity of networking, and very open and extrovert and enthusiastic.
Yes.
And he said, "Come, let's work at Matrimandir." So I started slowly. What happened during that in 1971 and in 1972 when I was there, the excavation was nearly finished, and all the preparations were going on for the first concreting on 28 February 1972 of doing that first concreting with people putting a little granite stone into the mixer and then mixing it and going down. On that time I helped in getting the pieces assembled, which were made in the workshop in Aspirations in Toujours Mieux. And when I came back with Hilde, my work automatically I connected with Ruth and with the work that he was doing, and it was construction work, bending bars. I was part of the steel team of Matrimandir for many years. Slowly a shift took place, because we were having a place in Centerfield, and there was a huge piece of land which had to be taken care of that time. I think it was more than 30 acres. And that work started whenever the monsoon started. We would stop work in Matrimandir and started with the fencing and the planting. Both Hilde and myself.
Tency, no one has spoken about Rude. Could you share some memories of him?
Ruth was the first one who was one of the very first one who welcomed me in Aspiration. We spoke the same language, Dutch, and I stayed for quite some time in his hut together with him in Aspiration, and he initiated me in the workings of Orville and the ashram. He had that spontaneous capacity of communicating. he had a religious background.
Yes, he was a priest, wasn't he?
He was a Franciscan, I believe. And he disappeared out of the order, traveled around Asia. I believe, I'm not too sure, but he was previously either in India or Pakistan, and then got connected with Mother and Sri Aurobindo and ashram and Orville, and immediately took part in the first years of Orville. He was a kind of a hub and a centerpiece, an initiator, and a person who had enough maturity and reason to guide all the stupidities which were happening at that moment, and all the irrational things. He was a reason of common sense to say no, let's as much as possible. He had a charisma, and he never took a role of leadership prominently, but he was a person who, because of his maturity, could guide the individuals and say, no, it's much better to do that one. So he was a huge influence for me in the beginning years.
What other people did you come to know in the ashram? You remember
my biggest contact in the ashram, and my door in the ashram, is Dr. Chamanal. And Chipra, of course, because you cannot contact Chamanal without coming in contact with Chipra,
right.
And you have to go through the door of acceptance to reach Chamanal through Chipra. We came in contact through a project, because after taking care of the land, things evolved, and I ultimately came into contact with renewable energy, solar water heaters, biogas plants, wind pumps, and things like that. And then in the 80s, we started things got a little bit more organized, and there was the necessity to organize ourselves on a much better way than sporadic, this project there, that project there, coming together. And we started with biogas plants at the end of the 70s, and it came to kind of maturity, the technology of ferrocement, which we started to experiment, and biogas plants. For me, it happened gradually, because the work on the land became more and more important, and I returned less and less to work to Matra Mandir. It took more and more another emphasis. And in 1984, we started Center for Scientific Research in Orville. CSR. And that was also when Chamanal started to play a quite dominant role in helping us to get projects for biogas and for wind pumps and for everything. And that's how I got in contact with them, with both of them. And it has continued up till today, that friendship. He has been a person who told me many stories about the ashram, mother, the disciples, the often gems about encounters that he had with Duma, Narad, Nalini, and things like that, who were passed on in a very casual way. never planned. He would come unexpected to Orville, and then he would sit, we would have a meal together or something, and then the stories poured out. And that it was very important, because he was a living testimony of that area, at least, and some of the things, the workings, which are for most of us very far now, they came out direct through his experience. I mean, Mother, his disciples, how it worked in the ashram and things like that. So he has been a very valuable connector for me with the ashram.
What is your present work?
I still work for CSR. We changed the name, it became Orville Center for Scientific Research. We are the research trust from Orville, and on behalf of that organization, we initiate projects which are beneficial for bringing in sustainability, appropriate technologies within the community. We develop them, we test them, we try to make them mature technologies, something that we can use within the community. This is a full-time job that I've been taking up since '84.
Is Shally part of this, or Shally is a different group?
Shally is part of the social research of SIRE.
SIRE, right, okay.
SIRE.
Yes.
There are two entities recognized by the government. There is the Social Research Trust, which is the educational trust, and there is the Scientific and Industrial Research Trust, which is CSR.
Now I know Orville shared some of her work with Sukrit on solar. Could you share some things about energy and in Orville?
It started with very humble. It started with heating water, painting a pot black and putting in an enclosure made of glass, so that it would heat during the day and that we could take a warm bath in the evening. That was the very beginning. And then, of course, it evolved. In the 90s, we came into contact with solar. We found out the huge possibilities, but in the beginning it was very expensive. Today it's one of the sources which has the most potential, the easiest, and where the price has come down tremendously. So this is one of the most feasible renewable energy sources for Orville. Wind is used still a tiny bit, but we have a very low wind pattern. We don't have the high winds. So wind generators are difficult to use, but wind pumps with multi-blades we can use. We just have enough wind for that one. Many people have installed solar panels as a backup. As a community, we rank as a user of quite a bit of solar power. We have extended that experience in sharing that knowledge and skill that we gained within the community of Orville by doing and by experimenting and by fine-tuning these systems to the outside, which actually brings us in necessary funds to do other things. CSR was a pioneer in that one. We developed the solar water pump. Very successful. We placed about 2,000 pumps throughout India, the bulk in the north, in Punjab. We did several big projects. One of the big projects was in Ladakh, where we placed, I believe, 8,000 solar panels, batteries, solar lanterns, and things like that. So once it becomes a routine, usually it goes over from the research trust to the commercial trust.
Okay.
And now this activity is taken over by other commercial units within Orville. But these are efforts, technologies which for a large part grew up in Orville and were brought to maturity within the community. The balance of systems, which we call BOS, the tracking system, all came out of research done in Orville.
Now we know that there will be a lake around the Matrimandir, but we don't have any water yet. And Mother said lake couldn't be built because there was no water, but she said it has been decided that there will be and it remains decided that there will be a lake around Matrimandir. How do you see the water coming? Is desalination a possibility?
I don't know, Narad, why you asked, but we moved in CSR from 3 core areas. One was design together with building technologies. We developed ferrocement, earth. Then we went over to renewable energy, and at the moment the focus is completely on water. So we're fully busy with water.
Okay.
We come to what Mother said in another way around. Up till now, Orville has been dependent only on borewell water.
Yes.
And that borewell water is having increasing difficulties. There is
The
not
aquifer
enough.
is lowering.
The water in the aquifers go down,
Yes.
especially now when we have a bad monsoon.
Yes.
Things become critical. So a group has formed together to get and put its concentration on that wide subject. And we're trying to organize all the many aspects of water. There is a water group, there is a group who is busy with providing and drafting a water plan for Orville, which are all necessary facets. The best source to provide water is by rainwater. This is how, in the south of India, for millennia, communities, civilizations have survived by having a lake or a pond and capturing the rainwater and taking care of it. This is the most sustainable and the feasible way. It has to, however, in an urban situation, it has to be planned and worked out properly, how we do that. We have to capture the runoff, the surface water, make sure that it ends into a lake. We have to make sure that there is not only one lake, but the overflow during the monsoon will be tremendous. So there should be a second and a third lake somewhere. And those lakes could supply water during the lean years to fill up the lake of Matrimandir. We slowly come towards the point that we see the wisdom in Mother's words. It was difficult to see before because speaking about the lake was kind of a science fiction in the situation where we were. But it makes so much sense what she said, to have a lake and a water provision for Orville other than just the bore wells. The bore wells are not going to sustain us when we grow more and more. It is a limited capacity of water.
Yeah.
So we need to go to what we call in terms multi-sourcing, which means rainwater. Desalinization will be part of it, but given the high-tech nature of that technology, it would be, we believe, a waste to put that in a lake, while you have actually the opportunity to have water coming out of the sky, usually every year, and to fill up the water body. So we are trying to put order in that huge field of water by drafting all the topics which connect with water and which ultimately would lead us to the realization of a matramendial lake, which would have to fulfill the parameters of there is an occult reason why around a sacred building there is water. That's the easiest to fulfill. Water and temples and churches and mosque and whatever, and synagogue, it goes together. For some reason or the other, the element of water is always integrated in around the sacred place. So that is easy. That has to be fulfilled. There has to be the aesthetical aspect, which has to, around matrimandia, which has to be absolutely incorporated. Not easy, because in our tropical climate, standing water, which is not refreshed, has a problem with algae growth.
Yes.
And becomes not usable. The other aspect that we would like to incorporate is all the environmental necessities to make a water body dynamic. It cannot be a static water body.
Yes.
It has to, and if you have a water body, you have animals. You have wildlife, aquatic life. You have fish, frog, birds, everything. It attracts it. You cannot keep that away. There is evaporation. How do you, we have more than 1 centimeter a day of evaporation during the high summer. Water disappears. Lastly, we believe that Mother spoke also that the water would need to be used for the community of Orville. That makes it very interesting, because it would create the need of a dynamic water body.
Circulation.
A circulation is necessary.
Yes.
All these things are being reflected upon. We start to study them. Some people have plans already to do it with high-tech means. We believe that it's good, that all the forces should come together. We hope that. But there are necessities to be taken care of. And unless these 4 major points fall together, and they will fall together in the end, the more energy we put into it, things, the puzzle pieces come together on the map. So we hope that in the next following years, the study will take shape and that we are able to start with small experiments. They have done already quite a bit of experiments on water catching in Matrimandir.
This I wanted to talk to you about also, because so many people worked on bunding, on the canyons and check dams. How much has that helped?
Huge help. It's an experience which very few people in India have, a practical experience, how to channel the rainwater, how to capture it in the lowest places, how to make use of it in the summer and for planting and all activities. This is a huge experience. And all these people, I think about Jaap in Ravenna, who is a very quiet person.
Very.
But he has an enormous insight and hands-on on this technique.
Oh,
And so we will have to work with capturing the rainwater where it falls and trying to bring it towards Matrimandir. The good thing about Matrimandir is that we are on an elevation, but behind Matrimandir there are 365 acres who are slightly higher.
oh.
365 acres.
Part of the green belt?
No, within the city.
Within the city.
Behind Nandaman. We're working on the topographic details. And that, if we would be able to, the runoff of that one is tremendous. So if we would be able to design within an urban landscape the channeling of the water so that part of it infiltrates, which is good, but there is always an excess. After several days of heavy rainfall, most of the water doesn't infiltrate anymore, but runs off. And that's how the canyons are formed. So if that water could be actually channeled towards little channels, towards going to Matrimandir, and you need silt traps and you need everything in order to get the silt out and get more or less pure water, we would create an unbelievable city.
There would be so much water.
There would be enough water. We have done the initial calculations in a report, and there is enough water to capture. We can actually provide for 15,000 people, initial state, if we only capture within the city, the inner city, not the greenbelt. Okay. If we extend to the greenbelt, we can even go further. But the land pattern is not in favor at the moment of the greenbelt. But on the inner city we could manage to supply water 95% on a yearly basis to 15,000 people without suffering.
Would the level of the Matrimandir lake change a lot?
Ultimately, it will change because you take out the water for consumption.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the effect of evaporation would also have an effect of it. That would have to be compensated by the overflow lakes.
Okay.
There is a kind of a rudimentary structure which is not completed. There is an outlet pipe to a lower place near the nursery. The amphitheater has an overflow towards the nursery. Okay. And there is a place which in a good monsoon fills up very rapidly there. So it's worthwhile to keep those experiments, to improve on these initial experiments that were done and try to come to a more realistic, scientific model. We ultimately have to move first to a model in order to make Matrimandir Lake possible. It's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge. But I do believe that the button is pushed. Good news.
Very good news, yes. So the water that's coming from the rains, I was told that no more topsoil goes into the sea. Is that correct?
We have managed pretty well zero runoff on the Orville plateau. Not fully, but a major part does not go to the sea. We thought that would help us to secure a sustainable that it would help to provide us with sustainable aquifers. Now, what we found out quite fast is that aquifers don't belong to Orville. They belong to the region. And we have a tiny percentage of the land which we take care of, but the aquifer which goes to Vanur and to Cuddalore is shared by millions of other people with thousands, 10,000, 100,000 bore wells, and they all pump. And we sit on a slider elevation. So our water level, we have no control with our bore wells. It's a backup source, the bore wells, but it's not a source despite all our efforts. It's not a source that can give us the means to grow and to make, after all, what we are looking for is a water security for a small city, 15 in the beginning and then 50,000 hopefully. And the foundation we have to build now for that water security. And this is where we are putting all the different puzzle pieces together in order to check how to do that best.
Last question. How do you see the progress of Orville today, 2016?
Positively.
Good.
Without any doubt. There is no other place in the world where I want to live, where my family wants to live, and most of my friends want to live. We criticize plenty, we fight plenty, we disagree in plenty, but we always come back to that one spot on the earth which is called Orville, which is from Mother and Sri Aurobindo's heaven. And what is interesting is that the global situation becomes more and more difficult around us. Changes are expected, but I see good things happening in Orville is that we are forced to come where we have to work, actually to combine the inner sustainability with the outer sustainability. And the inner sustainability comes first, because that will be the one, when you have established that one, it will help you with the outer sustainability, and not in reverse. Because on the outside we do the reverse. We start with the outer sustainability and we think that the inner will come. It has to go on the other side. You change, and we have given the possibility of experimenting with that change, that necessary change on behalf of humanity.
And how, another question, how is the work going with the local villages and the Tamil people who have joined you in Orville?
Some of them excellent, other ones more difficult. It's a long road to get acquainted with what is needed what is actually needed to evolve as an Orvillian. And we had the time, and we had I speak about the outside Orvillians who came from outside. We had the opportunity to study, to have access to a bit of money, to have an education, things like that. Those aspects from the local population who joined us and they have to acquire all these things. And that's a process which is not fast. And so on both sides of the groups have to try to find a balance and an understanding. We cannot do without them, And certainly they need us also for many of the initiatives. So we're linked together. We link together. We forget that often. It's not an easy situation. It's a challenge. I would say a big challenge. We have always been able to work through the difficulties, thanks to grace.
Yes.
So in the future, I'm sure, and the growth of consciousness takes place also in our brothers and sisters.
Yes.
It's not only in us. Yes. But it's one of the things that are not easy. There are other areas, of course. Financially, it's becoming much more difficult. You need to sustain yourself. You need to find an income which is more or less providing you to do the activities in Orville. These are all challenges, which slowly we work out. Honesty is essential in these things. Otherwise, we don't make it.
Tency, thank you so much.
Thank you, Narad.
It's a wonderful,
pleasure.
Wonderful